causing a big crash to not being allowed to even test the car by his own team. This man's story is truly shocking. Over the years, more than 400 drivers have earned the special super license needed to race in Formula One. Not all of them become top stars, but they all have the potential. But there's one unique case. Yuji Ide is the only driver in Formula One history to lose his super license. In 2006, Ide wasn't well known in racing. At 31 years old, he suddenly joined the Super Aguri team. Led by Aguri Suzuki and supported by Honda, Takuma Sato, a successful driver, got the first seat. But the team also wanted a Japanese driver for the second seat, and Ide was chosen. He had a decent racing background. He won races in Japanese karting and finished second in his first full season in Japanese F3. Later, he raced in European F3 and did okay, but his time in Formula One was brief and troubled. He caused a big crash and struggled in races. His team eventually stopped him from even testing the car. It's a story that's not often told, but definitely leaves an impression. From 2000 to 2002, he also ventured into prestigious events like the PAL Grand Prix and the Masters of F3, including races in Macau and Korea. Ide was in his sixth, and that's a long time to be spending at that level. Drivers in F1 usually make it up the leagues a lot quicker. Results were, at best, average. Yuji Ide's journey in Formula One was marked by challenges and contrasts with his teammate Renaud Durlot, who had no Wikipedia page but outscored him significantly. Durlot finished sixth in the championship with second place in the standings, while Ide managed one victory and a seventh place finish overall. Ide shifted to Formula Nippon in 2004, achieving one victory and a third place finish. In the following year, Ide won 2 races, but fell short of Satoshi Matayama. Joining Super Aguri in 2006, Ide faced hurdles as the team, based in the UK with a European staff, struggled with communication as he only spoke Japanese. Limited testing compounded his challenges, with teammate Takuma Sato taking the lead in car setup and issue resolution due to his English proficiency. Takuma Sato took charge of setting up the car and handling issues before the season began, leaving Yuji Ide in a secondary role even before his first race. Super Aguri's debut at the Bahrain Grand Prix was disappointing, as their car was the slowest on the grid. Takuma Sato, the more seasoned of the Super Aguri duo, clocked in at 1:37.411, a solid second and a half behind Tiago Monteiro's next slowest time. Now, Yuji Ide, well, he took a more leisurely approach, trailing 8 seconds further back at 140.270. And if that wasn't enough, he had already raised eyebrows for failing to check his mirrors and exhibiting some rather unpredictable driving. If you've seen the onboard footage of Ide during the Bahrain practice, you'll notice that his chosen racing lines into the corners weren't exactly ideal. Despite a small miracle that spared Ide from claiming the last spot on the grid, thanks to Raikkonen's mishap, he didn't fare much better by the first corner. In fact, by lapping 11. The leaders were already lapping him. To add a touch of comedy to his misfortunes, Ide's first ever pit stop turned into a fiasco. Apparently, he struggled to figure out how to engage the car in neutral, prompting a brave mechanic to reach into the cockpit and sort it out. This torturous affair reached an anticlimactic end on lap 35 when the engine decided to call it quits. In Malaysia, Yuji Ide continued to struggle as he consistently found himself at the back of the field in every session. He trailed behind Takuma Sato by over a second in lap times, and was slower than all other competitors until mechanical issues forced him to retire on lap 33. The troubles persisted in Melbourne, where during the first qualifying session, Ide inadvertently impeded Rubens Barrichello, affecting the Brazilian's lap unintentionally. Barrichello's swift reactions prevented a disaster, but the incident didn't sit well. This escapade not only did Ide's reputation no favors among the bigwigs in the sport, but also didn't earn him any points with his ultimate employers. To add insult to injury, Ide's qualifying time was a jaw-dropping 3 seconds slower than Sato's, leaving many wondering if the guy should even be allowed to race. True to the pattern, Ide found himself starting at the rear once again. And though he finally did the unthinkable and finished the race, he was a humbling 3 laps behind, even being lapped by his teammate in the same car. Adding a touch of cruelty to his struggles, the team decided to offer Ide no running at all in the test preceding the 4th race at Imola. Instead, they once again favored Sato to take the wheel. Perhaps in their own way, they knew what was coming for Aidi. At Imola, Yuji Ide found himself snug at the bottom of the grid, over a second and a half adrift from Sato's in the same machinery. By this point, Ide was increasingly frustrated with consistently finishing dead last since the start of the season. He wondered what he needed to do to compete, gain trust from the team, and turn things around. The pressure was undoubtedly mounting. However, on the first lap of the race, something changed for Ide. A determination to break free. He opted to make a move, diving down the inside of Christian Alba's Midland car, and all hell broke loose. However, in what can only be described as a misjudgment of epic proportions, Ide miscalculated his braking on cold tires. The consequence? A brutal collision with the Midland, propelling Alba into a terrifying series of barrel rolls that ended with the Dutchman upside down in the gravel. The crowd fell silent. Everyone had the same thought racing through their minds. Not again. Not at Imola. It was a heart-wrenching moment, with pit crews and the pit wall watching on in tense anticipation. Fortunately, though, Albus would emerge unscathed to a collective sigh of relief. He had survived a horrifying crash, and as if fate had a sense of irony, Ide's suspension called it quits on lap 22, solidifying his spot at the rear once more. The FIA had seen enough. Ide's evident lack of pace had already raised eyebrows, but the incidents involving Barrichello and Albers were the proverbial last straws. The governing body, citing Ide as a danger to his fellow drivers, took an unprecedented step and revoked his super license. It's important to grasp the gravity of this decision. It had never before occurred in F1 history. Revoking his super license may have seemed harsh, especially given that F1 has seen more destructive drivers in its history. Nevertheless, the FIA made the decision, and it would cast a shadow over Yuji Ide's career indefinitely. Undoubtedly caught off guard, Ide had already begun preparing for the next race at the Nürburgring by studying old race videos. Facing financial constraints after just 4 races in Formula One, Yuji Ide found himself effectively forced out. He returned to Formula Nippon, but couldn't achieve the same level of success as in 2004 and 2005. Over the next 4 seasons, Ide managed only 9 points, with his highest championship finish being 13th place. In Yuji Ide's place, the Frenchman Franck Montagny took over at Super Aguri. The team appeared to acknowledge the clear need. Having 2 Japanese drivers only makes sense if both are competitive. While it might be tempting to mock Yuji Ide's F1 stint for sensationalism and clicks, let's pause for a moment. There's more to Ide's story than just being a racing punchline. After his expulsion from F1, Ide returned to Japan but faced ongoing challenges. The issue? He never quite regained the form he showed before entering Formula One. In 2007, he continued in Formula Nippon with the Autobax racing team Aguri, owned by none other than Aguri Suzuki himself. During that season, Ide managed a 3rd-place finish in round 5 at Suzuka, showcasing glimpses of his past prowess. Ide then became a full-time driver in Super GT for Team Kunimitsu in 2008 and 2009. His victories at the 2010 Pocket GT Summer Special and a 2nd-place finish in the 2008 events stand out on his GT racing resume. However, his Formula Nippon endeavors in 2008 and 2010 were marked by little points, with only 3 occasions making it onto the scoreboard. The reasons for his dip in performance remain a bit elusive, perhaps. The F1 roller coaster had taken a toll on his spirit. While he might not have been on par with the skill level of his peers, and let's not forget the less-than-stellar car situation, Ide could have been a genuine contender in the GT scene. Unfortunately, a rough year in a struggling team, a lack of trust, coupled with the pressures of not being a standout talent, can do a number on one's morale. Racing, it seems, can be as much about mental fortitude as it is about speed and skill. And Yuji struggled with that. Yeah, I know. I said Mazepin was the worst of all time. And while Ide certainly gave him a challenge, circumstances and timing were less favorable for the Japanese driver. When debating who performed worse, Ide simply couldn't keep up. That said, if you're interested in learning about one of the most resilient drivers of all time, look no further than this video.